In September 2026, Ryan Foster joined a documentary team exploring abandoned industrial sites across Europe. Their latest destination was Blackstone Steel Works, a massive factory that had been closed for more than 40 years after a mysterious accident forced every worker to leave. No official report ever explained what had happened inside. Some blamed a chemical leak. Others believed a fire had nearly destroyed the facility. Yet the building still stood, untouched, as though everyone had simply walked away and never returned. Ryan arrived just before sunset. Rust covered the giant gates, broken windows reflected the fading light, and vines had swallowed most of the outer walls. Inside, the silence was overwhelming. Conveyor belts stood frozen in place. Thousands of tools remained exactly where the workers had left them decades earlier. Dust covered every surface. Everything except one machine. Near the center of the assembly hall stood an enormous steel press. Unlike everything around it, the machine looked almost clean. Someone, or something, had recently wiped away the dust. Ryan filmed it from every angle. As he moved closer, he noticed a small metal plate attached to the side. Only 5 words had been engraved into it. Production resumes at midnight. The sentence made no sense. The factory had no electricity. Its power had been disconnected decades ago. Smiling, Ryan assumed it was an old maintenance joke. As night fell, the documentary crew prepared to leave. Before walking out, Ryan glanced back toward the assembly hall one last time. For a split second, he thought he saw a small green indicator light glowing on the side of the giant press. Then it disappeared. Back at the hotel, Ryan reviewed the footage. The machine appeared in every recording. But something was different. In the reflection of its polished steel surface stood several workers wearing old factory uniforms. They hadn't been visible when he was filming. Each of them faced the machine in complete silence. None of the crew had seen them. Ryan enlarged the image. Every face was blurred beyond recognition. Only one detail remained perfectly clear. Each worker wore a metal badge with the same number, 314. Unable to sleep, Ryan returned to the factory alone shortly before midnight. As he stepped inside the dark assembly hall, a loud metallic click echoed through the building. Then, somewhere in the darkness, a machine slowly came to life. Ryan froze as the metallic sound echoed through the empty factory. The giant steel press had started moving. Slowly, rhythmically, yet the building had no electricity. One by one, more machines came to life. Conveyor belts began turning. Warning lights flashed above the production line. The air filled with the sound of gears that should have been silent for more than 40 years. Ryan lifted his camera. The lens captured rows of machines operating perfectly. But something was missing. There were no workers. Only empty workstations. Then, without warning, the camera screen flickered. For a brief second, dozens of workers appeared. They wore gray uniforms stained with oil. Each carried the same metal badge, 314. Ryan lowered the camera. The factory was empty again. He looked through the screen once more. The workers had returned. They weren't moving. They were all staring directly at him. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Suddenly, a loud factory siren echoed through the building. Every machine stopped at the exact same moment. The silence was almost unbearable. Then an old speaker hanging from the ceiling crackled to life. A distorted voice calmly announced, "Shift 314. Production complete." The lights immediately went out. Only a single red emergency lamp remained glowing at the end of the hall. Beneath it stood a heavy steel door Ryan hadn't noticed before. Painted across it were 4 faded words. Archive, authorized personnel only. The door slowly opened by itself. Inside was a narrow corridor leading deep beneath the factory. Ryan hesitated. Then he pointed his flashlight into the darkness. The corridor walls were covered with hundreds of employee photographs. Every picture showed the same expressionless faces. Every badge read, 314. At the end of the corridor, another photograph hung alone. It looked brand new. Ryan stepped closer. The person in the picture was wearing a factory uniform, and staring back at him was Ryan himself. Below the photograph, fresh black ink slowly appeared. Tomorrow's shift begins at midnight. Ryan suddenly realized the factory wasn't remembering its workers. It was choosing its next one. Ryan couldn't take his eyes off the photograph. His own face stared back at him from the wall. The uniform, the badge, 314. Someone had taken the picture before he had ever entered the factory. Suddenly, The lights throughout the underground corridor switched on. A loud factory bell echoed through the building. Then the old speaker crackled once more. Shift 314. Report to your station. Heavy footsteps echoed somewhere beyond the darkness. Ryan ran. As he reached the assembly hall, every machine had started operating again. Massive presses slammed into steel. Conveyor belts carried glowing sheets of metal. The factory was alive. Yet there wasn't a single worker in sight. Only shadows moved between the machines. Ryan raced toward the exit. Just before reaching the main doors, he looked back one final time. Standing beside the giant steel press was a man wearing an old supervisor's uniform. He slowly removed his cap and pointed toward the exit. He wasn't trying to stop Ryan. He was telling him to leave. Ryan stepped outside. The factory gates slammed shut behind him. At the exact same moment, every sound inside the building stopped. Silence returned. The following morning, Ryan came back with the rest of the documentary crew. The steel doors were sealed with thick chains. Every window was covered in decades of dust. Inside, the factory looked exactly as it had the day before. Cold, silent, abandoned. There were no footprints, no signs that any machine had moved. Ryan searched for the underground corridor. It was gone. A solid brick wall stood where the doorway had been. His photograph had vanished as well. Months later, while editing the documentary, Ryan noticed something strange. In the final seconds of one recording, the giant steel press could be seen clearly. For only a single frame, someone appeared standing beside it, wearing a clean factory uniform, a metal badge. 315. Ryan immediately checked the date the footage had been recorded. It was taken the morning after he escaped. To this day, Blackstone Steel Works remains abandoned. No electricity, no employees, no production. But every year, on the same night, people living nearby report hearing factory sirens echo through the valley. And when morning comes, the gates are always locked from the inside.